So I thought it would be interesting to talk about what religious science is for somebody who may be just be hearing that for the first time.
Okay, and there are many who are just now discovering it.
Right.
Religious science was actually started not as a religion at all. It was started by Dr. Ernest Holmes back when he started writing and studying. His first writings, actually, his first book was like I think the first one was 1917, then he had one out in 1919. And then by the early 20s, he was teaching in California. But in terms of how it began and what it's based on, it actually is drawn from what we refer to as the give me a minute to remember now. The Transcendentalist movement, which was in the northeastern states of the United States, mostly around Massachusetts and through that whole section there. They often refer to the Concord lectures, and Concord, of course, was one of the hotspots where all of this was taking place. The Transcendentalist movement really was a little prior to Holmes, but it was the work that was done during that time which had a strong influence on him. Emerson, for instance. Much of the teaching of religious science came from the work of Emerson and also the work of Judge Thomas Troward, who was from England in about the same time frame. And religious science, as I say, was initially done as a philosophy. It was with the intention that people would still go to their regular houses of worship, and that this was a philosophy, a way of life, a way of being that would expand an individual, allowing them to create the kind of life that they could have, and that Holmes and others, I always refer to religious science as ancient wisdom, new thought, because for me it has its grounding in what I think of as ancient wisdom. And new thought is what we call it now. There's nothing new about it because it's been around for a long, long time. And it's truly also based on the teachings of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. So if new thought isn't new, why do we call it new thought?
Because it's a new way of looking at things. It is when we have a new thought about something, then we will have a new experience. And religious science, we often say, change your thinking, change your life, and get a new thought. But new thought is kind of a generic term that encompasses not only religious science, but also unity and divine science, all of which sprung up at around the same time.
So new thought is really, you said it's really ancient wisdom.
I think of it as ancient wisdom. It's based on a lot of the natural religion, nature, paganism. I mean, many of the ideas are not, it's not a pagan type of, I don't mean to say that at all, but it is based on that natural philosophy. And what did you ask me there?
So when we bring new thought to ancient wisdom, that new thought actually isn't something that's kind of written down and recorded. It's an ever-evolving process.
Absolutely. Which is
what I love about it.
If you look at the writings of Socrates and all of our ancient Greek philosophers. In fact, one of the things I like, I don't remember now if you were in that particular class or not, a class that I've done on the roots of religious science.
No, I didn't. I'd like to take that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one because it does go back to the writings of the ancient Greeks and the philosophers. And many of their ideas are what have been included in what religious science is today. And many of those also are precursors to what we think of as Christianity. I mean, the concepts of loving your neighbor and not doing harm to others, and of there being one presence, one God. You know, all of that follows along from generation to generation. And if you look at or read some of the ancient philosophers with that kind of an open mind, you'll see it there.
So something that came to my mind, and I probably won't have the right wording for it, and I know that you will. A lot of the religious science new thought has to do with following a set of spiritual laws.
Yes, and spiritual laws would be correct. Everything in the universe is based on a law. I mean, natural laws, the law of electricity, gravity, all of those laws. Spiritual law is no different. You put in a particular mindset or an action, and you are going to get a result that matches that. That's a law. The law of electricity has been around forever, but it wasn't until we understood it and knew what it could do that people became aware of it, that it was discovered. And today, all we have to do is flip a switch. Well, that's basically what we have to do with our thinking sometimes and with our mind, is to flip that switch from a negative thought to a positive thought. And that is the beginning of getting us going on. And I say the beginning because it's not just like we can go around, well, I'm just going to have a happy thought today. And that's a good start.
Yeah.
That's an amazing start. But it has to be congruent with the rest of us. And if the rest of us says, who the hell are you kidding today? Then that new thought really isn't something, you're just clowning, you're just playing with it. You're not really consciously wanting to create that.
And that congruency.
Understand the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. And that congruency is so important, and understanding the spiritual laws and how to work with them. This may be a silly analogy, but something I thought of was, if you're making a cake and you want it to turn out well and fluffy and delicious, you have to make sure the right ingredients go into that. And if you miss one or two of the ingredients, it could ruin the whole cake.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of how I'm thinking.
Yes, or if you put something in that doesn't belong, it's going to make it sour or something else.
Yeah.
And to take that analogy even further, and I'll often do that in talking about the law, which is one of the aspects of God in religious science. We've got God or cosmic consciousness, if you will. And then we have the law of mind or the law of God, which is how that works. And the result, of course, is the effects in our life, the form that comes. And in addition to these three, there's our personal use of all of those. So it's true on a in the spiritual level, okay, but it's also true at the individual level. And there really is only one mind. There's not three sections, but there are three aspects to it. So if we have an idea and we want to make a cake, we want to make a beautiful cake because it's somebody's birthday and it needs to taste perfect, and we get all the best ingredients. And then what do we do with that batter once we get it? It goes into a form. That form is what we often call a mental equivalent. And we can put it in a square pan, or you can put it in a round pan, or you can put it in a heart-shaped pan, or you can put it in a bundt pan. It's going to come out looking like exactly what style pan you put it in. Well, the same thing, and it was an excellent analogy. It's the same thing with our thoughts. If we want to create a different way of being or a different way of reacting to something, our thought about it and the way we hold that thought and the way we present that thought is part of the form that we're giving it form. We are creating a mental equivalent in order to bring that about. So what would it feel like? What would it look like? What do I want my life to be like when that happens? And the form, rather than the spring pan or the square pan, is our thoughts about what I want to do with the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do I want to show up in the world? What do I want to do for a living? Where do I want to live? Where do I want to vacation? Who do I want in my life with me? That's all the really important things that one needs to consider when they decide that they're going to have a new thought and change their life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Something I love about religious science and attending your church is the factor of the accountability and responsibility.
Yeah.
Personal accountability and responsibility.
Yeah.
And not kind of just not participating. It's our participation that
is what makes it happen for
is
you.
what makes that
Yeah.
and creates that form and
Absolutely.
takes the form
Absolutely.
that kind of resonates with who we are on the level of soul, the level of our essence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of people ask, well, how come sometimes our New Thought and particularly religious science churches aren't overflowing? And I've discovered that the majority of people who walk into the doors of a religious science church, although it's beginning to change somewhat, but the majority of them are people and families who are at least in their 40s. They've come to a stage of their life where they're thinking more independently. Now that has changed a little bit, but for the most part, it's about the age of 40 when people really start thinking about their life in a different way.
Yeah, that midlife.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, and that, of course, is probably just my paradigm about it, but regardless, that's my paradigm about it, and that's where it is, right? But knowing that, you can change it. And that's a whole nother topic. But we were talking about
The accountability and responsibility
thank you.
and participation as an
Right.
individual, yeah.
Right. And for a lot of people, religious science does require that you do the work. And many, as a religious science minister, I'm also a practitioner. So I do a lot of healing work with people, spiritual healing, mental healing, physical healing, everything. It's all the same because it's all mind, and we treat, which is spiritual mind treatment, which is our term for affirmative prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And it is nothing more than prayer. But it requires the individual who is seeking an answer to do something. And most people still want to, go to confession and everything's okay, and they can go back and do what they were doing before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all good because God forgave them. And if that work is working for them and that's how their life is moving along, that's fine. I don't want to, move anybody from where they're at unless they're ready to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in religious science, it does take responsibility for our own healing, responsibility for our own life. it's like you can't any longer say, well, my folks were like this, and my mother always told me that, and that was just the way things were when I grew up, and that's always been the way it's worked in my life, and that's, my dad said that once, and it's been true ever since. But it doesn't have to be. That's a belief. That's a paradigm that we've set.
And that's living by, excuse me, by default rather than deliberate
Absolutely.
creation.
Yes,
which
absolutely.
I really do think, for a long time, and I do see that changing. For a long time, we've lived in that paradigm of this is the way it's always been, this is what I was taught, so this is how my life is going to be.
Exactly.
And that's the default.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. And, the default is that if we don't make a decision ourselves, somebody else is going to do it for us.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, if you want to be responsible for your own decisions, you're also responsible for how you are reacting to the situations in life. And I always look at responsibility as our ability to respond to what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We can all be confronted with the same experience, and every individual is going to respond to that situation differently.
And that's where consciousness comes in, and
Oh,
where
yeah.
you're at in your consciousness. So would you have, I know this is, an endless topic probably, but how would you define what consciousness is?
Mm.
And, we have different levels or different awarenesses of consciousness.
Yes. Well, let me give it a stab.
Yeah.
Where is my book with this glossary of consciousness? Consciousness is being conscious, is being aware. So our consciousness is our awareness of what's going on around us.
Which gives us that ability to respond rather than react or become
Right.
victim or...
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people get stuck in what we always thought of as the ego. Hey, me, I'm that, the ego. But that's not truly the ego. The ego is really there to protect us. It's part of us that we couldn't do without. But it's the personality ego that sometimes gets in there is the, strong force. But consciousness is what we are being conscious of in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And spiritual consciousness is what happens when we begin to be spiritually aware that there's something greater than I. And you see this even in children, little babies. When they're first coming into the world, they're aware of their connection. They're aware of what's going on in life.
Mm-hmm.
They're amazed at their skin. You have a little grandson, you know what that's like.
Mm-hmm.
They're amazed at the body and, all these things that are out there that are separate from them. And that's what happens when we first come into life. And over time, I think, when we develop spiritually, we become aware that everything that's happening out here in our life really is something that was inside, and it's being expressed in this world of form.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's, and this is getting very esoteric, I'm sure, but since I started opening my mouth, that's what happens in this third dimensional physical reality, this third dimensional planet, is creating form. And I think that's one of the reasons we're here, to learn how to create.
Yeah. And to be co-creators, because it's Source working in a partnership with Source to co-create.
Yes, yeah, and I think of Source or God as being everything. So there's no separation between us and Source. And many people are much more comfortable saying that I'm co-creating with God. God through you is creating. And it's creating something entirely different than what God's going to create through me.
And that
Now,
all
does that mean that we have a
depends
different God? I don't think so.
on- Right. It depends on what we're giving our
What we're
focus,
giving,
attention.
what
and-
we're putting our attention to, and our thoughts to, and our particular personality.
Which kind of leads me to this because I think a lot of the listeners may be familiar, even more so, with the law of attraction rather than
Right.
religious science. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because the law of attraction is one of the spiritual laws that kind of made it to the masses,
Right.
which is great.
Which is wonderful.
Great.
It's did a whole lot for our churches.
But-
Because many of our ministers of religious science were part of that moving.
Yeah, but there are over 100 different spiritual laws. The law of love, the law of one,
But they're
the
all
law
the
of
same.
harmony, but they're all the same.
They're all the same. Because there is only one. So we say that there's a law of attraction. We say that there's a law of harmony, the law of correspondence, the law of prosperity, the law of whatever. Okay? And yeah, we look at all of those things, and yet there really is only one law, and that's the law of mind or the law of God. And there are different aspects of it.
Well, that's an important distinction.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And I don't know that and nothing against The Secret and the law of attraction, nothing against that at all, but
No.
I don't know, they may have covered that distinction,
I don't think they really did.
because that's a pretty important distinction.
Yeah, and they took that from many old books. I mean, that was based on, oh my, and I don't remember what it was now.
Think and Grow Rich?
Yeah, it was, no, it wasn't Think and Grow, it was Wallace Waddell's book on, it has a new name, it have something to do about laws of success. And I think it was that one that it was based on. And that was from the 20s. You know, it may have been based on, I don't remember exactly, but I know it was a book that came out about the same time. And yes, there is an attraction because we attract to us what we are. So to say the law of attraction is not really misleading. But I would say that it's more than that, because it is also the law of mind and action, is the way we like to put it in religious science. And what happened with the law of attraction, or with The Secret, I should say, is that it really opened the ideas for a lot of people. And things like Oprah had begun to open minds already, and then the law of attraction just furthered that. And much of the literature that has been out since the 70s, and we've gotten more and more of it all the time. So it's just been building. But a lot of people saw the Secret, the movie The Secret, and they saw it as a cash machine.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to go to the post office, I'm going to go to my mailbox every day, and the money's just going to be coming in. Well, it kind of can work like that for you, but it takes more than just doing a vision board and just saying, I believe. It goes back to that congruency. We have to be very congruent with every aspect of our being. Not just the words that we're saying, but more important, the words that we're not saying. What is it you're feeling when you're saying that? You know, does it kind of stick in your craw, as my mother used to say, when you're saying it? Are you really feeling it? And is it feeling good? Does it feel right? Can you sing about it and feel joyful? Can you move your body? Because mind is everywhere. It's not just, we think about it being in a brain, but it's not. Mind is all of our consciousness. It's who we are.
So that congruency, like in the book group, book Power of the Subconscious Mind, it's important to understand that aspect as well, not just consciousness and what that is, but also the subconscious and how does that work, and how does that all tie
consciousness.
together. See, this is is really an important distinction, because this is what is at the core of religious science. So,
yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all consciousness.
Yeah.
We have subdivided it into different aspects, but there really is only one mind. There's a whole movement out now about oneness, that we're all connected. There's an interconnection between every one of us. You were talking about being at a seminar over the weekend, and how everybody it was like one mind, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, that's when it's all working and you have like-minded people together. That's what happens. But I don't know. I get lost sometimes. I don't know what else to say about it.
Well, something that came to my mind is you said there's a movement, the oneness movement that's going on. And so that oneness movement is about, in some way, identifying that we've been living with this concept of duality.
Yes.
And the biggest thing I see about duality is, in duality there's a right and a wrong, and up and a down. There's a judgment.
It's a third-dimensional way of being.
Yeah.
Okay, that goes back to the dimensions. It's a third-dimensional thing, and that's the overall operating system for planet Earth. At least that's my understanding of it.
Or it has been.
And it has been. Yeah, and there's, man, we can go on for months.
I
Whoa.
know.
We can go on for months about what all of that means and how people look at it, and I'm not even sure anymore. But there's also been a great spiritual awakening that's been going on for many years. And I believe we have reached that tipping point where it's, we have as many spiritually awakened people as those who are not spiritually awakened. So as that's happening, and I think that's what's happening in our world today, talk about getting off topic, or off planet, as that happens, there's turbulence going on, because you've got two different ideas that are, clashing.
As you talked about in the book group, paradigm shifting.
Right, exactly. So, I still think that there's one, consciousness is one thing. It's not, there are different levels of development of consciousness, okay? But there's not more than one consciousness. And we all individualize that consciousness.
So the clearer you can become on that there's there is one consciousness, the clearer you can become with that, the more you can, the way I perceive it, the more you live kind of in a sense of grace.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that happens. And I think we're continually evolving. And as we do, and I think we go through levels where we're feeling more, we're feeling, or we have evolved to a new level, and then we kind of plateau a little bit, and then we, have another understanding, another learning.
Yeah.
And our learnings are our experiences here on planet Earth, and they mostly have to do with relationships with others. And as we learn, then we get more understanding, and we have different ideas about things. And as that happens, we begin to develop more and more of our lives change, become more serene, and we have begun to advance more and more.
And I'm wondering, is the reason a lot of that has to do with relationship with each other is because basically there is one consciousness,
right.
And when we're looking at another, if we're judging that other, it's really ourselves.
Right, that's what we always call the mirror effect, and
Yeah.
that's been around for years.
Yeah. But things keep coming back.
Right,
and
psychologists have been
using
using it all the time, forever.
Yeah.
Yes, because we attract to us that which we are, or that which we need if we're at that point where we want to make a change. So we draw to us those people that are going to help to bring that about.
Yeah.
And it may be because they're pushing us where we don't want to be pushed, and then we're like, oh, this piece is really bad for me. But that may be exactly what they're supposed to do, and why they're there.
Yeah. So even if something feels so-called negative or an experience you don't want to be having, you wouldn't be having that experience if with another person if it wasn't in you. And so they're kind of the messenger, and they're there in a way, if feels like a negative experience, to help you clean that out, to help you move that out.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that you can become a clearer channel to that one consciousness.
Absolutely. I think so.
Yeah.
You got it.
Lesson's over.
Now you can move on to the next. But I think it's never ending too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And that's what I think that's probably what you refer to as soulhood.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it
is as we are developing our consciousness and becoming better and better beings, we finally reach that place of the absolute.
Yeah. And I do think because we are living longer and healthier lives, we actually are being given more of an opportunity to reach that place of soulhood. And maybe up till now, the majority kind of have went through the development stages of a human being, and that last stage being adulthood, and the maturity and the responsibilities that come with adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because we're living longer, healthier lives, it's giving us an opportunity to move into what I'm calling soulhood. And
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I also think that the living longer lives somehow may be related to the concept that that time is speeding up. That there's been talk for years about a shift coming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And with that is this idea of time speeding up. Time is going faster, and if you look at spirals and the way all of that works, they're just moving faster and faster.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's some kind of a connection with that.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I'm wondering, is it that time is moving faster, or are we shifting into those higher dimensions of third, fourth, fifth dimensions, where what we have been identifying as time no longer will exist?
Oh,
And that's why it
yes.
appears or feels like time is
Right.
moving faster, but
Right.
maybe that old concept of time is leaving. And from
Yeah,
that
and
place,
it could be both.
It could be both.
It could be both.
Yeah.
But I do think there is that expansion happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are moving into a higher frequency.
Because you would know a lot better than me, but isn't that where Jesus did his healing from, those higher dimensions?
I think so.
Where it was already done? He was, connected to the absolute?
Well, yes, he was. He knew that healing was already available. I always like to say that if you have a desire for something, it's already yours. And if we just look at the word desire, we can recognize that. D-E,
Yeah.
meaning of, and sire, the Father. So it's coming from the Father. We wouldn't have the idea for anything unless it already existed. We could not possibly have the idea for something unless it already existed. And all of our inventors, from Emerson and, not Emerson,
Thomas Edison?
Thomas Edison, but there was another one I was thinking about. Anyway, every one of them. Their ideas came from where?
Maybe you were thinking of Einstein?
Einstein, thank you. Yes. But their ideas came from their mind, but most of them didn't get their ideas consciously. They had a sense of something, but it came through them. It wasn't there, but it came through them. And everything has to come through us.
So it wasn't necessarily something they learned from a school book?
Absolutely not.
Although that probably helped them, exercise their brain to the point where they were able to receive that information. So both are necessary, but...
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
Probably. But I mean, they thought Einstein was dumb. I mean,
Yeah.
Send this kid home. He doesn't know nothing.
Yeah, they would have labeled him ADHD and given him a pill today.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it comes through us, the information always. And my understanding of how that works, it is coming through our subconscious mind, which is through the divine consciousness, which is, if it's all one, then it's all coming from the same place.
So what keeps you inspired and motivated to do the work you do and to be the minister of the Center for Spiritual Evolution? What keeps you inspired and motivated towards doing that?
I think I would have to say it's the teaching of it and the sharing it with others and seeing that light bulb go off in people's minds and people's lives. And frustrating when you see people at the brink of it and they just freeze, But in helping people to change their lives, because that's what happens as they begin to be exposed and absorbed in the understanding. Their lives get better, and they're doing new things. And then just to see that spark, that light, when it comes, it's just amazing. And to think that, you helped to strike that match for them.
And hence the name of the church,
Right.
Center for Spiritual Evolution, because
Right.
that's what you're kind of the midwife to. by
In a
ministering,
sense,
yeah.
absolutely, yeah. And one of the things you had said that you might want to be asking me about was how the name came about.
Yeah, yeah.
And I did come up with that as I recall. I came up with that myself. But then who knows where we're drawing things from, right? And it has to do with evolution, because we are always evolving. We're never the same. You know, you can't step into the same river twice, because it's changing and you're changing. Everything is always evolving and changing. And we are changing spiritually. You know, I don't always consider myself a real religious person, and some people look at that rather horrifiedly, but it happens to be true. But I definitely consider myself a very spiritual person. And being spiritual, to me, means the way we connect with God, the way we connect with the divine. And that's a very personal thing. And I think it's important that we all learn to do that. So the Center for Spiritual Evolution is a place where people can come to learn how to connect with themselves and to evolve spiritually. And life is about evolving. Mm-hmm. Life is always moving forward, always thrusting forward.
So if we get stuck somewhere and we think that we're this kind of one-dimensional character that's, you know, has this solid core, that's never really true, because even on a soul level, we're evolving on all levels, because everything is one. So one can't evolve without the other evolving. So,
well, again, on the esoteric and the metaphysical side, people talk about the fourth dimension of not having a body and being like bodies, and moving in consciousness in higher levels. I think all of that is true. You know, and this body that we have here is, you know, it's made up of the same elements that the Earth is made of, the Mother Earth is made up of. The same composition, you know, is found in all beings.
As Carl Sagan used to say, we are star stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Something you said, and maybe we'll close out after this, but something you said about desire kind of just hung in my ear there for a minute, because here's why. I love how you described that. You said that to me, I think, in the book group, and it's like, oh, then that way, of the Father, I can be comfortable with desire. But why that kind of hung on in my ear is because Eastern beliefs teach that enlightenment is the end of all desire. And so somehow Eastern and Western beliefs have to meet somewhere, because there's something that doesn't sit totally true with me, that enlightenment is the end of all desire. Could you talk a little bit from the perspective of religious science? And
yes. Eastern philosophies, as you say, and particularly Buddhist philosophies. The Buddhist tradition says that, you know, I think their eightfold path is to become desireless.
Right.
And I wonder if that may not be the same thing as recognizing that money isn't the root of evil. Money, it's your thought about it that is the root of evil. And if desire may not be, if you're looking at desire from a third dimensional position of, you know, I desire to want to go to Culver's.
Yeah, I desire to eat a gallon of ice cream. Which I kind of do, but...
Me too, I'm trying to break that one. But so I am very human. But that's a desire. It's a earthly desire.
Third dimensional
desire. And when we have
Which is different than of the Father desire.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, definitely. Make that clear.
Yeah.
When we have a desire to succeed, we have a desire to become a success, whether that's being on stage or acting, or if it's playing an instrument or singing or teaching or
Writing
whatever
a book.
it is, writing a book,
Mm-hmm.
or just to be a better, to be an A student. Whatever that is, we have, we certainly have personality desires of things that we want to do. And yet I think they're connected to that essence of who we are. And we never did talk about that aspect of it, did we? The essence or the spirit of who we are, which is our true nature and our true beingness. That is what is absolutely one with the Father, which is absolutely, in my understanding, it is that spiritual side of us, the spirit of us, that what we often call soul. And then as an aside, Ernest Holmes uses the word soul as the subconscious or the law, because it responds to what it's given, or the subjective. And I don't mean soul in that way, but in the popular sense of the word soul, as he's a good soul, we're really referring to that essence of the individual or the spirit of them.
So that's where the desire of the Father comes from.
Correct.
And there's a different kind of desire that the Buddhist tradition probably is talking about, of the third dimension.
And I've not studied Buddhism
Yeah, but
to really say.
That makes sense to me.
But that, in my mind, that makes sense. And yes, there are earthly desires, and sometimes people tend to overdo them. And there are inner desires that we have of wanting to attain more. Not obtain, but attain more. And to be more, to give more, to give something back to mankind.
And if you indulge in those earthly desires to the point of dismissing or pushing in the back seat the essence of you, that's where it becomes a problem.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And what is the old saying goes? Anything in excess is, isn't good for you.
Right.
But, a little taste of this and that.
Everything in balance.
Everything in balance, and in moderation.
So is there anything you want to add?
I think that if when somebody begins to awaken to their own spirituality, to their own sense of self, and they're seeking something that they're not finding through another religious avenue, that's the time when they're ready to come to a religious science church. And what they're going to find, in my belief, is that they're going to find a church service that's not so different than any other church service in terms of the different aspects of it, music and announcements and a message and prayer and meditation and so forth, offertory, and all of the same elements are there, but the direction, the feel of it and the message of it is self-empowering.